Alright, it's time for some entertainment. Shana the Wano Grotto and Christian Munez Munro.
The boys!
Thank you, Chris. Alrighty, okay, so Mano and I decided to step up tonight and do the joint best men's speech. And we did Google it and you know, find out what we should say. And one of the things was that it should go for about as long as Robert will take to consummate the marriage tonight. So we've already run over time, so we're off. Now, in all seriousness, Julie, this will not be a 21st speech. Okay, so there will be some little quirky stories, but nothing too intense. We've decided to break it down into what we think defines Rob the best, into a few characteristics, and along with that, a few key stories. So I'm going to pass it on to my main man, Mon.
Thanks, man. One of the first great qualities to find about Rob is his courage and his willingness to always have a go at anything, no matter what the results. I've never really known Rob to back down or step down from anything. Back when I remember when we were 15, and we both decided to go cliff diving off a local place called Jump Rock. We got there and there actually was a group of young ladies hanging out at the rock as well, so Rob thought this would be a good time to try and do a backflip for the first time off the rock. We got there and even though he hadn't tried this before, first attempt, landed flat on his back, knocked the wind out of himself, almost drowned and spent the next 3 hours lying by the side of the road in pain. But he had to go. He's always been a man to step up and have a go. So, I mean, the most recent time I think it was, possibly the most important, was to the move he made recently up to Newcastle to follow his heart for the woman he loves and start a new life together, which was probably one of his biggest moves and most courageous moves I think he's done.
Selflessness. Robert Towner is, without doubt, the most giving bloke I have ever met. Whether it be his time, the last beer in the fridge, or that girl at the St Augustine's school dance that you wanted to go speak to, he will always make way for his mates to go first. I think, you know, this is illustrated even further by Rob's old pickup line, which obviously hasn't been used for the last... How long have you guys been going out for? 4 years. Little over 4 years. His pickup line used to always be, he'd go up to a group of girls with Munro and I in the corner, not knowing what was happening, and just go up to them and say, "Have you guys met Wayne and Munro?" Very giving guy. But on a serious note, there's two very, I guess, standout moments that really defines the selflessness side of Towner. The first one for me was when I was turning 21. The bloke was on a trip overseas to America, and he wasn't due back for probably a couple of months, but lo and behold, he turned up on the date of my 21st to my surprise. So just really went to show just how much of a mate he was then, and it's still to this day probably the most precious gift that anyone's actually given me. And you know, despite the fact that he did end up on his underpants with myself and Pat Daly on the dance floor, at least Pat had tidy whities on. Towner had some godforsaken things on which I don't want to go into. The last story I want to tell about Towner in this regard is actually stolen from the man behind me, Pat Daly, and that involves when him and Towner once went for a surf or a bodyboard back in the day, and Rob and him were getting out of the surf, and this is right before Towner went to America, so he was strapped for cash. And lo and behold, he had a $5 note which washed up in front of him. And instead of the normal punter going, "Rightio, $5, I'll save this and maybe go get a Big Mac later," or whatever it is, he looked at Pat and with one word said, "Bruh, let's go get some milkshakes." Which I think just shows just how much he's willing to give his last penny for his mates.
Another great quality about Rob is fiercely committed to his friends. Although we'd all like to have a mate like Rob, his commitment to his close group of mates is like no one else. He's best mates with everyone, but with close mates with only a few. He's the type of guy, as Wayne said, if he was overseas or you were overseas and you needed him there, he'd actually be on the next plane over. Might actually take him a few days to A, find his passport, and B, get his crap together, but he'd get there eventually. I think we all know there is only one Rob Towner. I think everyone in this room's probably got their own Rob Towner story. Some probably not very appropriate to actually mention at this party, but we've got a few PG ones here for you. The two of us actually used to live together for a little while. One day we decided to actually go for a little surf down at the local beach, freshwater. Decided that it was pretty flat, probably weren't going to go out. I was driving and he somehow persuaded me to try the next beach. So I jumped in the car, tried the next beach, flat. Try up the coast a little bit, mate. Alright, we'll go for a drive up the coast for an hour. I think he's probably the only guy that somehow convinced me to drive from freshwater up to Coolangatta Beach in one day to pick the surf. When we got there and it was flat, we thought, stuff it, we'll go to Waterworld. He's one of the only guys, I mean, as a really committed friend, he's one of those guys that you'd do anything for as well. He's one of the only guys I would have ever driven up to Coolangatta for. And he's one of the only guys I would ever help spot his rent after he decided to spend his whole paycheck one night on Christmas drinks. That was a good move, mate. All the great qualities that come out of Rob are a testament to the fact that he comes from good stock. We were lucky enough to have all of the towners in great form at Rob's Bucks party a few weeks ago. The towner stats at the end of the night ended up like this. One of them managed to somehow be sick all over the kitchen floor, even though he was leaning over the kitchen sink at the time. Wayne and I found one passed out in the hallway of the hotel, covered in some type of sauce. And the other one spent the next morning looking for his keys, only to later find them in his back pocket. And whilst driving home, had to stop at the top of a Lambie road to be sick. I'll just say none of them was Rob, but I'll let you figure out who was who.
Hey, you forgot the hospital visit.
But on a very serious note in regards to the towners, Julie and Steve I'm talking about, thank you for your years of patience, not only with Rob but with his mates. You know, in over 20 years of hanging out on your TV room floor, eating your food out of your cupboard, you know, we've never ever felt anything but the most welcome there, and we honestly see it as almost like a second home. So thank you for your time over the years. So, to conclude, bruh, you are our brother.
We love you, mate.
We will always be there.
Through thick and through thin.
And to Courtney,
Well done.
you've got a keeper.
He's an absolute legend.
And really, best of luck with it all. He's now your problem.
For one more time, everyone to raise their glasses ever so slightly. And cheers to the new Mr. and Mrs. Towner.